Hey everybody, we're live and we didn't have an intro this time, but that's okay. We're still here, and I think that's what's important. We're here today with Hafiz as always, and with our new friend Bita. Bita, how are you today?
Good, good. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Can you introduce yourself and tell us all about your role at the Aga Khan Museum?
Sure. My name is Bita Pourvash, and I'm a curator at the Aga Khan Museum. I joined 2012, so it was 2 years actually before the museum was built. And I had started as a curatorial assistant, then assistant curator, then associate curator, and now I'm working as a curator. It's been a privilege to be with the museum for all these many years, and then working with the collection is very close to for my passion. And it's been a great couple of years that I've been working with the collection and different capacities, working with the collection, permanent gallery display, and also some of the exhibitions, and including I just curated our latest exhibition that is on display called Game On, which opened April 3rd and on view until September 7th.
And that's actually the reason we wanted to have you on for
Awesome.
today to talk
You know what,
more about
Hafiz?
Game On. Oh,
I
we
think
good?
I spelt it incorrectly on the thing because yeah, somewhere it's called Game One. And I made a mistake.
Oh,
I knew it. I thought, is it game one or game on? And I think I just made an error. So, anyways, here we go.
that's okay.
Keep on going. Keep
As
on
long as
going.
we
You
have
talk.
the game, as long as we have the game on it, so the
Yeah,
rest.
there we go. That was the reason we wanted to have you on.
Thank
This
you.
is such an exciting exhibit, and it's all about games. And so, can you walk us through how did this start? Like the idea for an
Hmm.
exhibit on games, why games, and maybe a little bit more about the exhibit itself.
For sure. So at the museum, different programming, exhibitions, lectures, different programs that we do, we always have one thing that we wanted to make sure that comes into our programming, and that's the concept of bringing communities, different people together through the arts or through different topics that we focus on. So we thought games are one of those topics that, again, it just breaks so many barriers, and then so many like game is such a fundamental part of all of us, and no matter of our background, we all play games, and then we don't even need to speak the same language, be from the same region. So there's a game we all can play through the language of the game. So that was always close to our heart, and we thought that is a strong topic to focus on. But Hafiz, I'm sure you remember back in 2022, like when you were still working at the Aga Khan Museum, and I had the privilege to be working with you at the time. So the topic came on at that point. So we thought that it might be very interesting to focus on the games. Back then, the conversation was only focused on some games such as chess and backgammon and snakes and ladder. I mean, the game that we today know as snakes and ladder. But then it was right after the pandemic, or like still during the pandemic. So because of the nature of the games, and it might be so hands-on, we wanted to make sure there's enough interactive also in the exhibition. Unfortunately, didn't realize back then. And a couple of years forward, now in 2026, of course, the planning for the exhibition started way earlier. But then we thought that it might be a great moment to rethink the conversation, the topic, especially because this year Toronto has been chosen as a host city for one of the soccer tournaments, a major soccer tournaments in the city. So we thought it's a great time to talk about games, no matter of the different types of the game. So we don't have any soccer in the exhibition, but this allowed us to focus on, and that's the first section in the exhibition that we talk about, that how games are come in different shapes and formats, and then it might be physical, might be even like in partnership with animals like race, and then also board games and tabletop games being one of the like major parts of basically games throughout history. So it allowed us to kind of bring back the conversation, but this time in more of a like a broader context. But then at the same time, back then it was supposed to be a smaller exhibition, but then the conversation and the opportunity came that it became one of our large exhibitions. That actually for this exhibition, we have 22 lenders that we borrowed for this particular exhibition, and we have more than 100 works on display. So it's one of the most heavy loan exhibitions that we have, which is quite exciting because so many of these artworks are first time being shown in North America. So I think this is a great opportunity that was provided to showcase these works.
That is phenomenal. Did you find the pandemic also shaped the thinking behind this? The fact that we were so cut off from human interaction, we were so cut off from being able to just be with other people, and the fact that we were in front of screens the whole time, that this idea of games and what games mean to culture and the way that people connect kind of changed the way that you viewed what this exhibit could look like?
So that's a great question, which is interesting because pandemic definitely changed the way that we interact. But then gaming and get connected through games, I think it's continued even during pandemic. I can say even my daughter became such a gamer, video gamer, because of the pandemic. So like, I mean, I think the nature of the gaming changed, but the interaction, that connection that we need to build through game state, because I mean, and that's another topic that we discuss in the exhibition. Games, of course, go beyond entertainment. So we all know. So there's so much that comes with the games. And it's about the way that we connect to, first of all, to learn so many of the human skills that, I mean, we need to pass to the next generation. We talk about even like passing the values, to teach like your values, not only skill, but like also values to the next generation, but also that connection. So I think that portion of it stayed throughout the pandemic, but then the fact of that we need to sit together, play together, that being in that kind of a moment together, that was the part definitely that maybe we couldn't see during pandemic. And to me, like when I walk in the exhibition and see so many of these works, and I can also showcase some of the examples later, that human interaction that comes, again, no matter of the different works that we display, that one thing that's shared is that people gather to play games. And in the exhibition, we wanted to make sure that there are large blown up photographs. We mostly focus on the late 19th century photographs and early 20th century, mostly black and white, because I mean, these are some of the earliest photograph of people being engaged in the game. So the time frame is that, but then one idea was that, first of all, to show people in the act of game, but then also bring the topic of how important it is. It's all about the people who gather to play the game. That's more important than the game board or game itself. So it's without those people, the game itself won't necessarily have that meaning. So that kind of shaped, as I say, like a little bit about the overall view of the exhibition, because now now that we are after pandemic, it allowed us to also have more of a interaction through the actual physical board games, have people be there, play, and that's a huge part of the exhibition to make sure it's interactive.
There's such a personal element to that too. You mentioned these photographs of people playing a game. I think sometimes it can be quite intimidating going into a museum space or a gallery or an archive, and things can almost feel like at a distance. How do I connect with this statue that is several hundred years old? But when you see
Yes.
something like a board game, say an old backgammon game or a snakes and ladders game, and you're like, oh, I remember having that at my grandparents' place or playing that when I was younger and growing up. Snakes and Ladders is actually my partner's favorite game when she was growing up.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then I remember in a conversation with you, Bita, there was this wonderful book that you guys had at the museum talking about how Snakes and Ladders was more of a spiritual teaching tool originally.
Yes.
Um, which you wouldn't think about today. But you mentioned earlier that these were used as learning tools, which is so fascinating to think about games in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And in the exhibition, actually, there's one section that we have three examples of today known as snakes and ladder. But then exactly we're talking about the history of them, of the game starting like at least going back to 13th century in the teachings for the in the Jain and Hindu tradition. That how it was a game that was. It was not actually a game. It was like a process to bring out those values about the vices and virtues in life and how it allows you to go up and then come down if you hit the vices, and then throughout those teaching, at the end, reached that liberation or moksha. But then when the same concepts adopted in the or adapted in the Islamic philosophy or Sufi tradition, the idea remains the same, but then the goal here changed to being the reunification with the divine, so or vessel. So you go through those same snakes, or like sometimes we have instead of ladders we have those arrows that kind of points you from one point to the other until we get to that highest point, which is that reunification. But then later we see that during the Victorian age, so the same game becomes more of a moral games for children, for kids, to teach them about, like, for example, if you help your neighbor, you go up. If you like break the window of the neighbor, you come down. So and then exactly, and then bit by bit, those elements were removed from the game, and it became the snakes and ladder that we know today. That is just a race game. But again, also behind some of these, let's say, simple games, there are sometimes so many other layers that why they are just simple. So, for example, some of them actually not necessarily snakes and ladder, but I don't remember. I think it's Game of Life. I believe that it was also attached to another pandemic historically, because I mean they wanted to, or it was a rush. I forgot the name, but it was because in order to make kids happy.
Oh, Candyland.
Candyland, exactly. In order to make kids happy. So that's why that game became so simple, colorful, just to kind of allow that. So again, there are reasons behind these games about the changes even when they were made. But yes, so many of them are about teaching those values and sometimes memories. We have poetry game even in the exhibition, so that it's all about, like, it was a way to basically make literature stay alive, make poetry stay alive. That's a way to let the next generation to remember, to recite, to. So there are, again, it's fascinating when we think about games and then how they are a huge, important part of our life.
What's the most interesting game that you have on exhibition?
Oh, like, so I love them all. But then it's a good question, because when we started, I was super excited. And again, I'm not a game specialist, so I'm an art historian. But then this topic allowed me to study and learn more about games. And then looking through the artworks, that's how I was started looking at these games. At the beginning, we had a very, very long list of the games, my wish list, to kind of represent in the exhibition. But then when we looked at the space, and then because we wanted to also allow each game to, we can go a little bit deeper down in each one. We look into their symbolism. We wanted to look into their journey. So we said, okay, so we cannot have everything. At the end, for each section of the gallery, and again, I can talk about those sections, we decided to choose 3 games for each of these sections. And then for, I don't know if you like, I can share some visuals
Sure.
to
That'd
show
be
you,
great.
like maybe it's, let me share my screen.
And those categories are board, quest, and arena, correct?
Exactly. Correct. Yes, that's correct. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe I'll put it, I'll skip the first one, and we can come back to it if. So in the first section, here we talk about, as I mentioned, we talk about, this is the introduction section. We talk about different types of game, physical games, board games. We even have the game, kind of a tipcat or gilidanda game that kids play with the, with sticks. So we talk about how games come in different shapes and formats. We talk about that. And then values in the game, universal values in the game. From here, there are 3 main sections. One is the board games of mind and strategy, which includes this wonderful game of Mancala, which basically also we talk about how games can be very simple. For example, Mancala is one of the oldest games. We don't even need a board. Historically, like, you might just dig some holes and play with shells and stones. But then we have that wonderful Rooster Mancala that actually it's on loan from Ottawa Trial Museum, and it belonged to a game enthusiast from Quebec who was traveled wide in Africa and Southeast Asia and collected all these game boards. And then apparently he was playing with all of those, so which was exciting. So the same game can become complex or can be just very simple. And then for each of these games, if you see here on the bottom, we also have a little bit of a information for our visitors about how to play the game, something quick about how many number of players, how many, what basically material you need, and how many, what's the objectives of the game, basically, like a quick how to play. In the same section, we have chess and backgammon, which we can highlight some of them later. This is my favorite because it's the oldest chess set, complete chess set known so far. There's only one pawn missing, and it's a glazed ceramic. It's from 12th century
Wow.
Iran. I love that. And here in this section, you see this wall that is has the chess pattern. It's actually like an angled wall. When visitors come to that point, maybe it was, you can see it in the previous, oh no, it's not visible. It's like a little bit towards the side. It has a backgammon pattern on one side and chess pattern on the other side. And visitor can choose if they want to go from backgammon first or chess, because as we know, so many times these chess and backgammon boards have chess on one side, backgammon on the inside. So we played a little bit on that. But then in the exhibition, we explain how the history of these two games are also connected. So when visitors choose one path, at the end, they come to the same story, and then they learn about the connection between history of the chess and backgammon, how they were like kind of invented kind of in relation or in conversation together, basically. So then the colors, just a fun fact, the colors are taken from the paintings in our collection. So the color in each of these sections correspond to one of the paintings or works in that section. So then the blue section that we see here, that's the part that's called Quest. Here we have the game of poetry and the snakes and ladder. Then we go to so-called green section. That's here we have more of a physical activity game. So here we look at wrestling, polo, and falconry. So these are the main section of the exhibition. And let me see, I can stop sharing for now, and then I can share back later.
That's so cool.
That is very,
So
very cool.
can you tell me a little bit about the game of poetry? Is it Japanese or Chinese?
This one is Persian. So
Oh, Persian.
So it's,
Okay, cool.
Yes. So actually, maybe if I going back to your previous question, and then I'll come back to this because it's a little bit related. When we were looking into selecting the works, the games, we selected based on the ones that, as a museum of that we have a collection of Islamic art, have artworks that can best back up the story that we want to tell. So that's one of the ways that we selected the artworks, including the work on poetry. But then but within the exhibition, we have different ways to bring in other games as well. So for example, we have a touch table that we can talk about other dice games. So we have a puzzle that talks about, so there are ways that we included to bring more of the games in the conversation. But the games that I showed you are the ones that we really could like going deep down. Going to your question about poetry. So it's an interesting game. The folio that I showed you is actually a page from a book called Shahnameh, which is Book of Kings. That's written by a Persian poet in 1010, so very early 11th century. His name was Ferdowsi. So it took him 30 years to finish the book. So it has more, like almost 60,000 couplets. By the time he finished, the patron who ordered the book kind of forget about it. So and then the poet got frustrated, and imagine in 1010 he writes about his frustration that it took me 30 years and I was expecting more. So this was not what I was expecting. So in the game, in that folio, it shows one of the early moments that we encountered this game, and that's basically that he wants to go see the Sultan of the time, but then the court poets wouldn't recognize him as being that great poet and won't allow him to go in. So they kind of say, in order for you to go in, you have to come and play this poetry battle with us. So there were three poets. So each one tells a part of a verse. So the verses, basically there are two in each verse. So they all say a section, and he needs to complete it with the utmost beauty, because I mean, there's so much going into the game of poetry about the like the harmony, the weight of the poetry. So, of course, being Ferdowsi, being that great poet, he can finish it beautifully, and then he was allowed to see the Sultan. But then we have a catalog also for the exhibition that I invited someone, a great scholar that works on this field, and she wrote it beautifully and then compared it to even to rap battles today, how it's a game that you don't even need board or like even being physically, but it's about your memory, it's about the wit, it's about quick thinking and being present to play that game. But it was also originally invented as a way for you to remember and recite poetry, because so many of these poetry games that are after that Ferdowsi phase that I mentioned later, it was a way to for you to remember this poetry. And then for example, one person recites one verse, the next person should recite starting another verse by the last letter of the previous verse. So it's a
Oh,
constantly, you
wow.
throw a verse, then I look at the last letter, I say, and then it goes on and on until someone suddenly repeats a verse that has been told before. And then you can narrow it down, you can make it difficult. For example, you can pick a poet, and then we all need to just stick to that. So there are different ways, but at the end, it's about passing the heritage, passing the literature, and safeguarding it.
That's so cool. That's very, very neat. Luke actually commented something. One second, hold on. He commented, amazing. He's talking about the exhibition, and he has an art show at the Daphne's Centre d'Art in Montreal coming up, where he's showing card art from his game, Three Ravens. It'll be running a game design workshop and pop-up playtest session there. So if you're in the Montreal area, go check out the Daphne's Centre d'Art, and you can see Luke's exhibition there. Or if you're in Toronto, you can go to the Aga Khan Museum and see the game exhibition there. Game on.
Yeah, I the there's a ton of interesting things about Ferdowsi and the Shahnamehs. What Shahnameh? No.
Shahnameh, yeah.
Oh, why am I blanking? You just said it. Was it?
Shahnameh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Shahnameh. It's actually the longest yeah, it's actually the longest epic poem in the world. And it's also a form of literature which I believe is called A Mirror for Princes, which is about ethics. And the funny thing is the person who commissioned it didn't want to pay full price for it at the end. So it's like, dude, kind of like you need this more than anyone. But Sen brought up Japan and China because even today it's really popular to get into these very literature themed games where you are quoting poetry um, it sounds quite similar to this. So it's interesting to see how different cultures have games that they develop around language and how it may look different or how it might shift or change. And you were speaking a bit about layering. So when we're looking at things, there's layers to them. A lot of these games tend to have traveled. We're either traveling along the Silk Road or with merchants or all these different things. How does the exhibit show how games were influenced by different cultures as they moved along? Like you mentioned chess, and I feel like that's a really wonderful example of how people have put their own imprint on it over time.
Exactly. Like most of the games that we feature, we made sure to have that actually covered, because we think that's one of the important ways that it's very important about games. So games connect us literally sitting and playing the same game, but it also connect us because of that global journey that they took. And then it's really amazing to look at how these games traveled, and along the way, they picked up on the society that they were played in. So like so many times we see the footprint or like the influences of the society that these games were played in. Yes, so that's especially very strong in when we talk about chess in the exhibition. And we showcase, we first talk about like, so going back to the origin of chess, it might have actually at the beginning not even being a game. So as we know, it has been at the beginning, it was more of an army formation in India. So it was a way to like, kind of learn more about like the cavalry, the like different groups in the army, and then kind of strategize that movement of the army. But somewhere
Almost like a
around
learning tool.
exactly, yeah. So we believe, again, I reached out to several scholars, a couple of them also contribute to the catalog. There is no exact date, but then somewhere around the 6th century, we know that by then the game was already very well developed and established. And that's when the game from India took its first global journey bring to the court of Iranians before Islam during the Sasanian time as a challenge. So it was posed as a challenge, as a kind of that if you can solve this game without knowing what it is, then, for example, you won't need to pay this, or because there was a diplomatic relationship. So,
Right.
And then we actually have a painting that showcases that. Maybe I can share again my
Sure.
screen. I'm
I
such
feel
a
like
visual person. I would like to see visuals.
we stumbled across the best way to deal with the tariff issue right now. We just challenge, our global leaders need to challenge one another to a game of chess.
Chess.
That's right.
Exactly. So here, can you see my screen?
Yep.
So here is actually that moment. So this folio is also from a Shahnameh, Book of King, but on loan from Metropolitan Museum. So here is the moment that the game is arrived from India to Iran, and then we see that the Grand Vizier, the minister, is very much into the game, trying to solve it. So, like, actually, he can solve the game. That's how the story goes. Of course, it was written by Ferdowsi, so this is more of a, not necessarily the historical account, but it might be more of a, like, also how it was remain in the memory and the cultural memory. And then in return, he invented the game of backgammon and then sent it to India. So here is also quite interesting that how one game create that moment for another game to be invented, and then kind of that cultural relationship through these games, basically. So in the exhibition, if visitors choose to go from the backgammon side when they're coming into that decision point, so that's the first part of the story that they see. So they see actually the next episode of this scene, that the game from Iran, the backgammon, has been sent now to the court of India. So that's how we started these two sections. And that's why I said these two kind of are related. So here we're talking about 6th century. It's during the Sasanian time. Soon after, in the 7th century, Islam came to Iran. And through the network of Muslims, that's how the game starts moving. And as Hafiz, as you mentioned, through the trades, through the networks that they had. So it moves through like several countries, including it arrives to Europe. So this is the same game piece that I mentioned from 12th century. That's one of the early game pieces, only one pawn missing. And then here it's the time that several of these chess pieces had different names. So at the beginning, their movement, their names was different. So in the exhibition, we discuss all that. We unpack how when they moved, their names got changed, their movement got changed. One of the biggest changes is that the character that sits next to the king, at this time that we see, it was called Wazir or minister. And interestingly, if I play chess even today, I still call it Wazir, even though it has the movements of a queen today. So the Wazir, once the chess later reached Europe, and then here we have Book of Chess also in the exhibition, a facsimile of that explains it was written by Alfonso, one of the major books that kind of brings all that knowledge about the games, including chess and other board games, that also dice-based games. So here, bit by bit, when the game reaches to Spain and Italy, because of the significance of queenship, so the Wazir changed to be the queen, because that's the character that sits next to the king and gets the most power on the board and has become very prominent in the game. Before that, it was very limited. So here is one of those moments that we see that the game picks up on the society that it was played, and then we can see that reflection in the game. I like these two examples to highlight, because this queen piece that we see, these two are from AGO, on loan to the collection, to the exhibition. So the figure queen that we see is from late 14th century, and that's almost around the time that the chess that we know today kind of actually formed, because again, it went through so many changes. Even the shape of the board changed. It's at one point, it was instead of being 8 by 8, it had 10 by 10, 10 by 8. The movements were different. So this is around the time that it becomes closer to the chess that we play today. And the figure on the chess figure on the left, this one is also quite interesting, because the piece itself, these are all both ivory. It was made in Fatimid in Egypt in 10th century. And this part was just a triangle, just showing the head of the knight, which called horse at the time. So, but 200 years later, when it reaches Europe, someone decides to carve a face on it, and then adding their own Latin initials at the bottom, making it like a kind of a seal. So here it's a kind of a tangible example also, a game piece that literally moved from court to court. And then we see that from Egypt it reached to Europe and then went through this transformation.
That's so fascinating. It's
I love
wonderful.
this piece.
It's so interesting too because it's like here's this form of flattery. You're trying to, I guess, appeal to the courts, to the queens at the time, and it's like, well, you're the most powerful person, so you're the most powerful person in this game. And
Exactly.
it's also so interesting to see some of those little remnants left behind. So the rook piece is still called a rook, even
Correct.
though most people, if you ask them what a rook is, they wouldn't be able to really tell you what that is.
Exactly.
And checkmate is that. If correct me if I'm wrong, did that come from Shah Mat? The king is dead.
The checkmate, yes, correct. So like even the word chess, at like when you go back, I mean, then the Indian name of the game was Chaturanga, and then when it comes to Iran, in the old Persian, it's called Chatrang, and then when Islam came to Iran, in Arabic it becomes Shatranj, and then if you continue the root of the game, then later apparently becomes the chess. That again going back to the same root. And checkmate is also come from Shahmat, means basically the king is the king is dead, basically, like, or like has been removed from the game. It's
That's
captured.
interesting. I
Yeah.
love the linguistics of it because in Portuguese it's xadrez, so like it
Oh,
makes sense that it just kind of like
interesting.
continued along the
Interesting.
lines, yeah,
Interesting.
and then
Yeah.
eventually, I guess, becomes chess.
Chess.
Um,
Exactly.
I just wanted to actually just tell you about the game that I was mentioning before when I said, "Oh, is that the Japanese game?" So Karuta is
Mm-hmm.
a Japanese game about poetry, where it's kind of like spoons plus like a it's like a dexterity test plus a listening test. So you listen to a reader read off these lines from a 13th century Japanese poem, and you have to like quickly identify what the next line will be in the poem.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's so interesting. They actually made a whole cartoon about it. So
Wow.
there you go. To keep it alive. And there are like leagues of people who still play this game to this day. So
That's very
it's
interesting.
fascinating. All this stuff is very culturally interesting to me. So
Yeah,
that's
and
cool.
what you mentioned is also quite interesting, how games continue their relevance and continue to be played. So it's interesting that we look into a game that was back in 11th century, 12th century, for example, and still continued, or like, for example, as you mentioned, so the way that, I mean, games continue to be played, yes, they might change, but then several factors of them remains the same. And that also remind me that one other point about the exhibition is that we also, like, even when we were talking about chess, for example, we wanted to make sure that we have contemporary voices also heard in the exhibition, and how these games might even bring some excitement in the field of contemporary art for so many artists that are inspired from these games to create their artworks. The first work that I showed you was actually like by Yoko Ono, that actually like create that whole white chessboard chess set. So when you look at the work, it's all white, but then Yoko Ono, being very prominent figure in peacemaking and talking about peace, for her, she uses chess as a like a vehicle to talk about that, her thinking. Because when you start, imagine if you start playing that artwork, that chess that is all white, after a moment, after like a little bit of playing, you lose track of who's playing what piece. And then at that time, you have to then start talking, negotiation, trust, because the work called played by trust. So at that point, we need to like continue with just conversation. And then for her, that was the actual moment that the real game begins, because it's all about connection. And then there's another work that maybe that's I can show you that to you, but I mean that's made the conception of it, but was by Nicholas by sorry, let me just show, by John Cage. Let me share my screen quickly just to make sure it's here. So this is the work that is actually an electrified chessboard. And it's, for me, very interesting because chess is known as a game that is all strategy. And then John Cage, when he thought about it, he brought an element of chance to this chessboard. And there's a little bit of a Canadian history here as well, because John Cage, the famous musician, like reached out to a University of Toronto student in 1968 to create this chessboard for him. And it has light sensors. So, and there were like live musicians who were playing when like the game of chess was played on this board. Then he invited Marcel Duchamp, who is the grandfather of contemporary art, and they came to Toronto in 1968 and they played on this chessboard. And the moment you start like moving these chess pieces, it releases like one of these basically the large speakers that they were in the space to allow these sounds of these musicians to come by chance and play it and then mix and stop. So because nobody knew how like which piece gonna be moving, so by just playing with the pieces, so that the element of chance allowed the music to be part of the experience. And the whole the event was taking place at TMU Ryerson back then, and it was broadcasted by CBC. So if like in the exhibition we have the CBC coverage, plus in the back you see the archival material from TMU, plus the work from John Cage Trust. So to me that's exciting how a game goes beyond just being like a simple game, and then also bring that kind of also art and conversations and other type of creativity into the work.
Yeah,
That's
chess is
lovely.
such a strong symbol for diplomacy, for planning, for skill. I know in film, quite often, if you want to show and not tell, if you want a character to seem smart and thoughtful, you get them to play chess, and just sets it up for people. And even just that idea that it could get ideas across about how we could change the world. There was a version of chess that came out called Peace Chess, which introduces a third player whose entire role is to get in the way to make sure that there's no possible legal moves for people to get to. So your goal is to actually, they're still trying to destroy one
100%.
another. Your goal is to try and get in the way to make sure that you put roadblocks up using your own pieces to stop them from making any legal moves, which is, it's really fascinating. And then there's also a connection to automa or I can never say it well, the robots, like the Mechanical Turk, where they had like um,
Yes.
the chessboard that was supposed to play itself, but secretly there was a chess master hiding inside for like years and years and years.
Exactly.
Um,
And tomorrow, actually, we're going to have a lecture at the museum by an associate professor at the University of Toronto that talks about how games also played a part in invention of technologies and different sciences and computer and AI and everything. Like and other games, like even backgammon being behind and playing with the dice being behind the probability, like I mean techniques that we know. And then he's actually like referring to that machine that you mentioned, Hafiz, and then how that was like a simple machine that was invented back then, even though there was a person sitting, but then how that was also like was part of the thinking about using chess to go beyond just the game.
there's quite a few talks that you're having at the museum. So there's one tomorrow. Can people still get tickets for that, by the way?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's tomorrow at starts at 6:30 to 7:30. The gallery will be open till 8:30. So we wanted to make sure if anyone wants to view the gallery after, we're gonna have it open for another hour to view. Yeah.
And then there's also a talk that you're doing with someone from NASA as well too, tying
Yes.
games to
Ooh.
SpaceX. Can you tell us a bit about that one as
Yeah.
well?
That's not game related. So that's
Ah,
just a
okay.
separate.
That's just something cool
That's me
that's going
wearing
on
a
at the
different
museum.
hat. So that at that point.
Okay.
Yes.
I saw that and it mixed in my brain, and I'm
Yeah.
like, space plus games plus
Yeah.
museums just sounds like the holy trinity right there.
That's
Right?
also happening in June, June 24th. But we have several film screening that are also tied about games. We are thinking about also another game, another movie, and another film. So it allows us different opportunities. But then the space one is not a game. Yeah. So,
Okay. It's just something else that's cool. So if anyone's into space and is
exactly.
watching this, you can
Yeah.
also go check that out.
Tell us a little bit about the exhibit, like the how long is it running for? What are the operating hours of the museum? Where's it located? All that kind of stuff. The good
Oh,
stuff.
sure. Yes. So the exhibition is at the Aga Khan Museum. Aga Khan Museum is located at Don Mills and Winford, or like let's say Don Mills at Eglinton. I can say now people can get LRT. So finally, after many years, so that's working now. And then there's an Aga Khan Museum station for LRT. So that's the closest one for sure. And In the museum, we have two floors. The first floor is where we have our mostly, artworks from our own collection. So this exhibition is on the second floor. That's where we have mostly our temporary exhibitions. We usually change them between 5 to 6 months. So this one opened in April, and then it's going all the way to September 7th.
Perfect.
You also mentioned that there's a catalog. So if someone is just really enthralled by this history of games and they want to take a piece of that home with them, they could get that at the museum as well?
Yes. So we invited 9 authors for this catalog. So again, because there are 3 different main sections, so we wanted to, like, each section, each of the game has a different authors looking into the topic. So we had 9 authors contributed, and the first section is on board games, chess, backgammon. Mancala is, I mentioned it only in the introduction. We don't have a separate section on it, but then the other ones are more for the quest, and then also the arena, which is more of a physical games.
Very cool.
So one big section of the exhibition is also talking about backgammon, but going back about how the dynamic of the games are different, and then being able to play together. So it's very interesting when we switch from chess to backgammon. Chess being very, as you said, strategic, when you want to show someone very, very like focused, very determined, very being played with strategy. That's where everybody's shown playing with chess. Versus on the other side, we have backgammon. And because backgammon plays with the roll of dice, that's the moment that unpredictability come to play. And for that reason, backgammon has been likened more to our regular life every day, and there's so many different fantastic poetry about it that it's amazing, because it talks about how much we think and that we've planned everything. At the end in the life, we come up with so many unpredictable moments that we have to navigate through them. And for that reason, backgammon has been cherished for that, because it allows you to kind of also learn about how I can just manage between strategy and chance at the same time. And that's the game that also is not isolated or quiet. We have pieces that showcase people gathered around, so it always comes with laughter, sound. It's more of a busy social game that we also showcase that aspect in the exhibition. But one thing that is to me was very exciting when I was working on it is we think it's just a game, but then the ideas and then the symbolic meanings behind it is very also amazing, because the invention of the game, as mentioned, goes back to Sasanian pre-Islamic time, during the time that we have Zoroastrian mostly as the main faith of the time. So the idea of this game so much goes back to the cosmology of Zoroastrians, basically. So each aspect of the game has meanings. For example, like the board itself represents the earth or the world. The 30 pieces that we have represents the day and night. There are 24 points in the game that are the hours of the day. And then the dice, when I was reading about the dice, and it's again captured in the catalog, every number on the dice has a meaning. Number 1, for example, being the Ahura Mazda or the deity. 2 being the true realm of existence, being spiritual or material world, and so on. It goes on and on. So the 6 being 6 festivals of the year. So it's very interesting. Or 4 being the 4 corners of the earth. So every single even number on a dice comes with a meaning, which is to me quite interesting.
That's very interesting. How's the reception been so far? Because it's been open now for a couple of weeks, I believe, right?
It's we had the entire April and May, so like it's now 2 months already.
Oh, a couple of months then, yeah.
Yes, 2 months. I think I'm biased, but I think people like it. So, but one thing that I keep hearing from people is that, and makes me happy because I feel like it delivered on what our vision was, is that we wanted the exhibition to have so many information. We wanted to have in layers of information that if someone wants to walk in for 15 minutes, be happy, or if someone wants to be there for 90 minutes, stay happy. So there are layers so that you can just adjust based on how much you want to learn, how much you want to spend time. And it's not all about learning, it's all about just exploring. It's not necessarily learning. But then at the same time, we wanted to have several accessible moments. We didn't want to just be accessible at the same. We wanted to have the layers, but being accessible. And I think that's what I'm hearing from the audience, that apparently we've delivered on that, because it's very multi-generational. People can come and spark conversation between different generations. There are ample opportunities to play games. Also in the exhibition, I actually also put some slides. If you guys are interested, I can share to you that we work, for example, with TMU to create end game chess puzzles for us. And some of
Very
these
cool.
end games goes back to like some of the historic figures from 19th century, that some of those might not be able to play today because the rules of the game changed, but some of them are still playable, and apparently is one of the hardest chess puzzles still available, for example. Let, let me show you if that's okay. I feel bad about
Visuals are great. Yeah.
to, but I think visuals is really hoping to show more. Like here is the puzzle. Let me from here. So this is, for example, them one of them, because I mean there are different difficulty levels. People can choose. So this is difficulty number 2, and then the question here, the puzzle is that you need to checkmate in 2, and direction is that you have to, the white needs to move. And then people can put their puzzle, their pieces, and then start playing. And again, we have a simple to very difficult, and also we have a straight chess if someone just wants to sit and play. And they're like, we provide them with clues if they get stuck. There's a QR code that they can get help with. Then we have this activity book that we want to make sure the little audience become a game maker at the end. So it's a way for them. Each section corresponds the color to that section that people visit. There are different activities based on what they see, like, or how step by step we can help them to kind of learn about different aspects of creating or designing a game. For example, this part I believe is about designing your piece. One is about the concept ideas, the rules. One is about movement. One is about the pieces. And then at the end of each section, there is they can collect their badges. There are embossing stations that they can go get their badges and then continue. And then at the end, they create their own game, basically. Then this is the touch table that I mentioned, because in the exhibition, we only had a limited number of games that we could, make available. So during this touch table, with the help of this touch table, people can learn about some of the other games that some of them don't exist anymore, for example, but then they had that influence on the development of other race games, but also some of the games we play today. So this was a way for us to bring more conversations about games. And for word games, we have an entire wall. We didn't want to print anything because we wanted to mention how you don't even need anything to play this game. You just can sit in the sofa and then learn and play some of these games. And this is actually one of the embossing stations that kids can get their badges. And the puzzle that also allows us to bring some of the other games. So when people play the puzzle, they learn about some of the other games that otherwise are not represented in the gallery. Oh, yeah, and that's the catalog.
That's the catalog.
Oh, and this one is my favorite. Sorry, now that is on the cover. Yeah. So this is actually a tile backgammon that is from 17th century, and it was in a pavilion garden of someone in 17th century in Isfahan in Iran. And I really love it because of the technique of the tile itself, but also the fact that it's one of the only known examples that it comes as a tile.
So that's a single tile?
No, there are 4 tiles.
Okay.
So the one that that I showed you, there are 2 tiles, but we repeated that one. But because the actual thing has 2 tiles, people facing you, the other tiles are the other way around. So that, I mean, if we sit and play, each one has 2 figures facing you. But because of the catalog, we only showed half because we just mirrored it on the other half.
Gotcha. That is very cool. Question for Sen. Are you going to come visit us in Toronto to check out the exhibit?
Well, I was just going to say, one of the cool things that's happening at the end of this month in Toronto is Porterspiel North. So the 24th, 25th, 26th, I believe, of June, a bunch of game designers are going to descend upon Toronto. And hopefully, maybe we can talk some of them into seeing the exhibition. I think that'd be a great kind of other thing to do, right?
That would be nice.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll talk to Joe after this. Just say,
Yeah, yeah,
hey,
yeah.
this is going on. Bita, you mentioned a few films as well too. So what kind of films did you find to showcase at the museum? Are they more historical films? Are they films about like the history of games?
Not necessarily history of games, but it's about like and that's mostly in our education department's hands. Like I know about one that we are working on. It's actually a South Asian film. It's a film from 1970s, but showcase chess. Symbolically throughout the exhibition is about two characters that are very fascinated about the game of chess. They just basically invest their entire life in the game of chess, but then looks into the game as a more of a like a different ways of looking as a like a political symbolic. So the game of chess, that strategy that comes with it, and then that division that comes in the game has been explored in the film as a kind of a bringing other like a social and political aspect of the time that the film was created. The other ones, I'm not quite necessarily know all the details, but one that I know that our education team was working on was looking at not necessarily, again, board game, but like games that were made through robotic games, creating these different characters that then they can compete as a kind of again, in the robotic sense of games, but empowering younger generations about that. But speaking of that, one other aspect of the exhibition that I forgot to mention, and I think it's also very dear to my heart, is a video game that we are featuring in the exhibition. So, as part of the exhibition, we reached out to the Syrian Canadian artist Jawa El Kash, and so we asked. She creates these, usually she uses the medium of digital simulation as her art medium, but she usually creates these pseudo worlds that they are based on a real historic place, but then she's also very fascinated with surrealism, and that was also her practice at the time. So she combines them and then creates a new world based on that historic world. So when I started working on this game, I thought it might be very interesting if she accepts to create a game for us. So I reached out to her as a commission, and that's the only commission that work that we have in the exhibition. And she accepted, and it's the first time that she creates a game that has not necessarily winning or losing. It's because there's no winning, but it's about like collecting artifacts, and there's a that you kind of progress in the game. It's not just exploring. So you go through the game and explore the game. It's a fascinating game. If there is interest, I can explain more about it because it's based on a historic 18th century palace and a game in that palace. But I'm not
Oh,
sure
sure.
if
Tell us about
video.
it. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
that's
No, tell us
super
about it.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the game is actually, again, going back, I'll share some visuals here for you. Let me find the slide and then I'll share again. So she was talking about how she encountered a fountain in an 18th century palace called Azem Palace. That historically the idea was that, let me share the screen to show you the fountain. Sorry, can you see my screen? All
I
good?
can. We're going to move that
Nice.
over.
Perfect. So here's the fountain. And there are similar fountains from 18th century in Syria and Damascus. So historically, the idea was that like apparently, like you put something like rose petals into both sides of this fountain in the maze, and then they're gonna race, going with the force of water. So here, instead of dice, you have the force of water that kind of allows those race to happen. Whoever reaches to the center is the winner. So she took this idea and then created this artwork, the game design for us. So when visitors come in, they can go into this maze, which is all inspired by architecture and then the same look and feel of that 18th century palace. But within the game, visitors encounter 4 artifacts that she created, inspired by so that's the last, I'll take you there. inspired by the Syrian artifact in our collection. So you go, and then when you collect these artifacts, so there's a window pop-up that explains what that artwork that she created is, and then she brings some of her memory of upbringing in Syria, how it reminds her of for example, the coffee house that she went and played backgammon with her grandfather. So like she helped us to learn more about her memory and understanding and upbringing through the playing this game. And then once you collect all these 4 artifacts, you go back to the central fountain here, and then it is a portal that pulls you in the night scene of the palace. So here is the actual palace on the right, and then on the left is the world that she created, that you go inside and then browse and then see all these wonderful elements of the palace, and then walk, and there is a sound element that she went to the palace and then recorded the sound of the birds and the flow of water that visitors can hear and listen. So here it becomes very multisensory experience. And also, again, going back to the quest, her work is showcased in the quest section. It becomes a way for her to allows us to learn more about her culture, her heritage, and bringing it out to us as the player for the game. And I think we have a view of this is how it's been played in this space. So there's a chart, people look, read, and then start playing the game.
That's a really great like transition that goes from we're looking at ancient games, we're looking at more modern interpretations, and now we have the digital side of things as well too. It's very cool.
And actually, I'm presenting her work in early July in a digital lab for Islamic visual culture. Her work has been selected that I'm going to go and present her work in that as part of that seminar.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
It has been fascinating. Yeah, it's just been fascinating going through this history of games and the connections to people and the little things that you wouldn't think about, the learning, the layers, the language, the music, the poetry that's tied to these things. So I think it's very easy just to, you see some cardboard and some cards and you're just like, okay, that's something that maybe kids can play with. And then, no, there is a very deep, rich history that it comes from, and then hopefully we'll continue through as we all engage with this with ourselves, with our families.
Yeah, I mean, games are fascinating.
Really interesting. Keep going.
Just one thing that I find very fascinating, and there are like also some artwork, including the last work in the exhibition, which I don't think that we have time for that. But one thing that to me makes games quite interesting is that games create that kind of an equal space for everyone. So within the game, we are equal. So we are not playing ourselves, we are playing the character of the game. And it's very evident in some of the works that we display in the gallery. But then it doesn't guarantee the equality within it. So that's a choice that we have to make sure that the games stay equal. So that's also another my fascination with the game, and then how it allows that equality that we can bring to the game, and then come across our differences, and then but sit and play the same game as equal partners.
Yeah. One of the fascinating things to me is that these things still exist after so many years of being maybe not even thought of as a cultural artifact that people should save. They're just game pieces, right? And it reminds me of Thomas Simanjuk, he's an Inuit uh, game designer nowadays. He's a modern game designer, and he was talking to me one day about the games that were played by people of his culture, and they all had to like survive because when you live in the Arctic, everything kind of gets wet and moldy and rots over time. And so, everything was made from scrimshaw, and pieces were carved out of, walrus tusks and things like that. So it's very interesting to hear similar stories from different parts of the world, where people have made game boards out of things they find, out of parts that are around them that have survived much longer than any of the paper-based things that we're making today, without kind of microplastics into the world too. So it's very interesting to hear all the history and the culture, especially behind all of these games. Oh, Luke is asking,
And
is there a catalog for the show?
yes, so there's a catalog that has 9 authors contributing, and then based on the 3 sections and different games that mentioned. I believe it's only available from through the museum's shop. I don't think
Excellent.
that it's been available anywhere else.
Okay. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
That was fantastic, Bita. Thank you so much for joining us today, talking us through the exhibit, showing off all the wonderful pieces, including your favorite piece that was in there.
Thank you.
I will be there tomorrow, so I'm going to be scoping around and pointing things out to others to be like, this Bita was telling us about this one.
There's a
Um, so that's going to be fun.
Thank you
But
for having me.
yeah,
I mean, I again, to me, games and game boards are such a fascinating part of all our lives. So that I'm very. It's a privilege to be here to talk about the exhibition to you guys.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We loved having you. All right, everybody. I think that's it for the show. We are hitting 10 o'clock, so we're going to say goodbye to everybody now. Bita, it was so awesome having you. Hafiz, we'll see you next week. I guess next week. Who are we
yes,
having in
next
the
week
future, Hafiz?
we have Scott Kelly who's going to be on, and we're going to be talking about games for education.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Perfect, perfect, perfect. We'll see everybody next week, same time, same place. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Hey, there we go. I think there's a